Thank you very
Good evening. Happy Friday. Judge Jacquelyn is back. Court is now in order. It's Friday night, so I gotta do something fun for Friday because typically it's not the best night for streaming. So, I try to spice things up. And last time I streamed on a Friday, I was wearing my official judge's robe, even though I'm not an official judge yet. Not yet. But tonight we are going to continue the hearing that we started 2 nights ago with Senator Josh Hawley, all about AI and surveillance and how it's affecting you, the American people. So let's get started. And as always, I'm here in the chat, reading what you're writing, commenting, and let's get going.
very much. Thank you to all of the witnesses. We're now going to begin rounds of questioning. We're going to do 7-minute rounds, and I will begin. I want to start with you, Ms. Owens, if I could, and I want to talk about the techniques that these mega corporations are using in conjunction with the AI industry. Let's just start with a real-life incident. Earlier this year, there was a disturbing incident that played out on Twitter, on X, that shed some light, I think, on how airlines are using surveillance pricing in real time right in front of us. I think I've got the relevant exchange over my shoulder here. You have an ex-user who in April, this is April of this year, posted that he had seen a $230 price increase in one day when he was booking travel for a funeral on JetBlue. $230 price increase. Now here's the interesting thing. JetBlue's own corporate account helpfully responded to him and instructed him to clear the cache and the cookies or use an incognito window. Now, Ms. Owens, you're familiar with this incident, I assume. Can you explain to us broadly what's going on here?
Yes, thanks. I am familiar with this.
You click your microphone there. How about now? Go ahead, keep going. We'll see if we can turn you up.
I am familiar with this incident. It's really just a stunning revelation from a corporate Twitter account of the topic of this hearing today, surveillance pricing, the practice of using your personal information in price-setting decisions. This really simple tweet basically is a confession to things.
This is issues on their end, not us, by the way. Welcome, guys. Hi, Dave. Hi, Maddie, my favorite moderator. I know you told me earlier you weren't going to be on the treadmill. Maybe on Sunday I can get you back on the treadmill to get your steps in. So I think they're having an issue with the mic. It's not on my end. Maybe JetBlue did cut the mic, like Dave said.
This individual is trying to get to a funeral. He needs this.
Yeah, so fun fact, this actually is an official judge's robe. I got it from an official judge's uniform store online. And, I feel real official. I
think that everybody who flies, let's just stick with that particular industry, everybody who flies, I think, has the sense intuitively that they're being ripped off in some way on these airlines. And here's a smoking gun. I want to emphasize, this is their own corporate account. And they did not say in response, oops, we were hacked. What they said is we made a mistake. No doubt they did. The mistake of candor, where they confessed inadvertently what they're really doing. Let me just ask you, Dr. Owens, because I think it's pretty clear, but what's the motive here? I mean, what is JetBlue's motive? What would you say?
This is about profit.
Yeah.
The data that powers the surveillance pricing engine is estimated to be a $700 billion industry by 2030. That's not very far away.
What kind of data do companies like JetBlue have on us? I mean, we talked about the browser history, the fact that they're clearly tracking this person around. They can see what's in their cache and so forth. But what else? What other kinds of information do these companies have that they can use to set these personalized scam, I would say, prices?
Yeah, unfortunately for consumers, the answer...
JetBlue really not wanting this lady to speak, apparently.
It's behavioral data, what you buy, what you don't buy, what you keep in your cart.
Okay, so apparently earlier we posted a long form of this video, and we had to turn the volume all the way up so you can hear it. If you go back into my channel and you look at the long form, you'll hear the full testimony.
Airlines are not the only companies that are doing this. Your initiative, your organization, the Groundwork Collaborative, issued an expose on Instacart earlier this year. What your findings betray and put onto the record is just incredible. Your report exposed how Instacart's charging different shoppers different prices for the same groceries at the same time. And the amount of money that we're talking about here is really extraordinary. Your report found that the price swings for an average family could end up being in the neighborhood of $1,200 per year. $1,200 per year. That is a lot of money. Tell us about what you found in your report and why it's so significant.
Yeah, so we uncovered a vast experiment that Instacart was running on millions of Americans while they shop for groceries. What we found is that different shoppers were being offered different prices for the exact same set of items at the exact same time from the exact same pickup location. This wasn't an occasional finding. More than 3/4 of the items in our test grocery basket were found to be offered at different prices, sometimes as many as 5 prices per item. Sometimes the price difference was as much as 23% for a simple carton of eggs.
Wow. Mr. Hedges, if I could just turn to you, let's talk a little bit about the role that the credit cards play in this. Let's go back to that poster about JetBlue and just think about the information that these companies have. You are Visa's former chief data officer. Talk to us a little bit about what you know about what the industry, what kind of information the industry gathers. And I want to zero you in on one thing in particular. JetBlue works reportedly with one of your former competitors, MasterCard, to make assumptions and draw profiles about its customers, about JetBlue's customers, and they use categories like confident or satisfied or focused or in love with JetBlue. This MasterCard subsidiary then flags if a JetBlue customer is likely to pay an above average fare. This seems extraordinary. Tell us about what you have learned about what this subset of at least some of the credit card industry is doing to participate in surveillance pricing.
Sure. The example you're using is a really good one. And to my earlier comments, the subsidiary that MasterCard was using is a company called Dynamic Yield. One of the specialties of what Dynamic Yield does is calculate willingness to pay. And so there's a whole set of data that's collected to inform willingness to pay. Only a small part of it actually is credit card transaction related, but in the development of willingness to pay calculations, in the example you gave, there's all sorts of sources, some of it card payment related, but much of it from other categories, like where do you usually, in this case, in an airline case, where do you really travel? When did you book the ticket? Have you already booked a hotel? Do you have friends or neighbors or relatives in the area? How long ago was the trip organized? All those, using the airline example, all those things will influence the score and willingness to pay, which you quoted the examples of the terminology that's used in the dynamic yield case.
But just so I understand, the credit card transactions form, in this case of this MasterCard entity, they form the backbone of this data. Is that correct? They're part of the data.
It's definitely part of the data. I don't think it'd be fair to say it's the backbone of the data. Actually, I think the available...
Because there's so much of it, because there's so much data.
I mean, the browsing ability, the ability to track where someone's shopping, the ability to infer where they live, the ability to infer the sense of urgency comes from lots of different data sources.
I just think it is an extraordinary revelation to most Americans, it certainly is to me, that what you're doing with a credit card over here could be used by a company over there to set a price for you that's different than the price that they would give to Senator Durbin or to Senator Lee or anybody in the audience. I mean, that is extraordinary. And what say do I have in any of it? None.
Well,
none whatsoever.
And to your point, specifically, the transaction occurring lets the seller or the airline know it's you, right? I mean, that's the culminating point of the search process or the shopping process where all those factors get actioned.
Do you prefer Karen or Carone?
Karen, please.
Karen.
Thank you.
Tell me about Norway.
Thank you so much for asking. Norway provides a warning that I think we should pay attention to. They were an early adopter of the electronic shelf labels, so customers are used to seeing them in the stores, and they're used to seeing the prices change while they're shopping. One article estimated sometimes as much as 100 times a day. And what happened in Norway is that the Norwegian Competition Authority found that the three major grocery companies, which together control about 95% of the grocery market there, were essentially price fixing.
Colluding.
They were colluding to fix prices. They were visiting each other's stores to document price comparisons, but instead of using it to lower prices, they were able to confirm when their competitor was offering a higher price. And the electronic shelf labels were the important piece of the puzzle that enabled them to raise their own prices instantly when they saw that. They were charged a record high fine that was recently upheld. And I think an important lesson there is that thankfully, they had a very aggressive regulator in Norway that caught them doing this, and I think that's something that we need to be very aware could happen here.
Dr. Zhang, I don't think we consumers have a fighting chance. The information that's being gathered about us involuntarily is hard to describe in terms of any limitations. Facial recognition, for goodness sakes, you can walk in the front door of the store and they'll identify you on the spot. I'm told that many stores, particularly grocery stores, track the customers in their journey through the store, dwell time at certain shelves. All this is being accumulated. I don't think it's any coincidence that most stores put dairy products as far away from the front door as possible. So they think people want to buy milk before they go home or eggs. It's way over there in the corner of the store. You have to wander through the store to get over there. It's all designed in terms of measuring and influencing consumer behavior. Does a consumer have a chance?
I definitely think that consumers do have a chance, and the reason is because information is very, very important for the functioning of the economy. So, which basically means that the firms do
Even
need
my
better
information, my personal information?
personal information. Well, the consumers consist of individuals, and so you have to collect individual information to really get to know the consumers in the market. I would say that that's the first case. And in order for the economy to function, you need to have the information. And of course, that once you collect the information, the firms, in fact, that would do everything possible, of course, not only serve the customers. In the meantime, they actually have to make some profit. Otherwise, they cannot survive in the marketplace. I don't really know if supermarkets are the most profitable business and in the world. I don't know how much profit they are making. If you look at how many the stores like that and close every year, and you would imagine that in fact that they probably have not used the information in a good way.
Now, if
So, in the chat, I think her name is Miss Fitzley. She had a really good comment. Listen, if the consumer is going to have a chance, stop shopping big stores, shop local, and shop farms. Education is the best information. I agree with you. I think that now we have a great opportunity now that we're finding out that these corporations are basically using our data against us. We don't have to participate. We don't at all. To her point, we can just shop at local places. There are probably millions of mom pa owned shops around the country. We can just choose to shop there, and we should be supporting local shops, and we should be supporting small businesses. That's what America, really was founded on. And the truth of the matter, from streaming all of these Senate and congressional hearings over the last few months, it's been very eye-opening for me, and I've learned a lot. And I haven't learned stuff that I necessarily wanted to learn, but one of my takeaways is our government has given a lot of power to corporations. And it almost feels like some of our government agencies that are supposed to be protecting us, the consumer, are actually just protecting these big corporations. It really does feel like that. So now that we know that this is going on, we just don't, we don't have to participate. We really don't. We don't have to shop at big box stores anymore. We don't have to shop at Walmart or Target or any of the stores that we know are utilizing our data against us. We can choose to shop locally, and we can also just be more deliberate with our shopping. You know, be more organized. I remember growing up, visiting my grandparents when they were retired, like they loved couponing. And they would, you know, spend their days going from store to store with, you know, the coupons that they cut out to get the best deals. And they had a lot of fun with it. And, you know, they had money. They didn't necessarily need to do that, but they're from the Depression era, and it was really important to them to save money. So, you know, they had a good time, and they were very deliberate with their shopping. And we can do the same thing, especially now that we know that this is going on. And I am on a treadmill. I am. And hopefully I can stay in this judge's robe the whole stream. It gets really hot in here, but I was able to do it the last Friday that I wore it. But let's continue.
If I'm buying online, though, it's another story, right?
You buy online definitely is a different story, and they can capture more information from you for sure.
Yeah, they seem to read your mind. I don't have any of Claude or any of those helpers in my home to monitor what's going on.
By the way, I get upset too. And a lot of times when the firms do something like that, of course, in that case, given that the prices are actually changing from the high to low, and
Guys, I just want to point out, if you don't like me being on a treadmill and it's distracting you from watching this hearing, you don't have to watch. You can go to senate.gov and you can watch this stream on your own. It's from August 4th. It's on there. It's free. You can certainly go on it. And I think it's so funny when somebody, because I get this comment all the time, it's unprofessional that I'm on a treadmill. Okay, I'm not in the Senate floor right now. I'm not on the Senate floor. This is my private YouTube channel. This is my thing. I stream while I get my steps in. I've motivated a lot of people to do the same and get their steps in. I get anywhere from 7,000 to sometimes over 15,000 steps on these streams. And if you don't like it, it's a free country. You don't have to be here. But I'm literally wearing a judge's robe. I'm not a judge. I have a prop gavel. Like, this is not professional, guys. Like, I am not a professional, okay? Like, this is not professional. So I'm sorry if you don't like it or if it's distracting or it's unprofessional, but I'm not trying to be professional. I'm literally wearing a judge's robe costume on a Friday night at almost 10 o'clock Eastern on a treadmill, streaming and chatting with you guys. I'm having fun here. I hope you guys are having fun. But if you don't like it, you don't have to be here. And I don't understand why that is disrespectful or makes me a narcissist. I don't know if you guys feel like cathartic commenting on that, but I'm having fun, and I have a lot of regulars that come to my streams and really enjoy it. So, like, I hope that you're having fun. The point of this is to have fun, be healthy, get our steps in, and just provide, you know, an alternate perspective to these things. So for all of my regulars that are here, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so happy to have you guys on here, and let's continue to have fun.
in this case, of course, that you have the opportunity to take advantage of the low prices too. So which means that consumers do have to sort of, consumers will be empowered and for their own agency, and then to try to look for low prices, for sure, in this environment.
Mr. Hedges, many years ago, many years ago, I walked into this room and sat down at the corner over there for Arlen Specter, who had a hearing on swipe fees and interchange fees. I'd never heard of them. I listened and understood that if I had a business, a restaurant in Springfield, Illinois, and I wanted to have Visa and MasterCard, I had to pay a swipe fee, a percentage of the cost of a dinner that I'm going to serve, and add that on to my cost. The consumer still doesn't know how much that is, by and large, and yet that fee continues to be charged, and most retailers will tell you it's a big piece of their profit. Is that fair?
Is the practice fair? Is that the question you're asking?
If there's no negotiation, take it or leave it, Mr. Retailer. Try living without Visa and MasterCard. See how you
Sure. So I retired from Visa about 10 months ago, and in my role as chief data officer, I was not involved in interchange management and swipe fee management
We're
practices.
not going to prosecute you. Go forward.
Pardon me?
We're not going to prosecute you. Go ahead.
No, yeah. So I mean, I think, clarity regarding pricing ought to be the principle that's working here, and transparency around it. And I, wholeheartedly embrace all that, but I'm not really in a good position to talk about the pricing that Visa pursues because I was never involved in the management of it.
Our hearing is about information being gathered and consumers paying a higher price because of it. That is our concern. I think the Chairman's illustrated that pretty effectively. I think the same thing applies when it comes to Visa and MasterCard. I think there ought to be disclosure to the consumer about what you're charging in that industry, what you did charge in that industry with your former employer as part of it. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Lee.
Thanks so much, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing. This hearing raises interesting questions. AI surveillance pricing is a new development, and it's one that finds itself at the crossroads of a whole bunch of developments in a bunch of different concerns, including consumer privacy, competition, artificial intelligence, and I appreciate the opportunity to flesh some of these out. Last month, I wrote a letter to Uber and to Lyft seeking some information about whether, to what extent, and what ways their algorithms might use personal data, behavioral signals, or competitor information to help determine rider fares and driver compensation at any given moment. I look forward to their responses, but those questions relate to a broad question before us today, which involves when, whether, to what extent, in what way does legitimate dynamic pricing at some point morph into something more troubling? That raises serious legal and policy concerns. And then what, if anything, do existing laws have to say about that? And are existing laws sufficient to deal with it? Dr. Owens, I'd like to start with you, if that's all right. Now, you support prohibiting companies, as I understand it, from using personal data to set individualized prices. What kind of test, if we were writing a law, what sort of statutory text would you suggest that we use in order to distinguish between surveillance pricing on the one hand and lawful dynamic pricing on the other hand? Utilizing the basic inputs like supply, demand, and inventory, as well as time to set prices.
Yeah, I think dynamic pricing can be a useful pricing tool. We usually think of dynamic pricing as factoring things like market conditions into the picture. So trying to manage supply and demand and bring scarce resources into equilibrium. Personalized pricing, on the other hand, is really more about the practice of setting individualized prices, and in the case of surveillance pricing, individualized prices based on data that the company is collecting on you and sort of turning against you.
Using your unique vulnerabilities that they may have access to or may be aware of you more than you are.
Absolutely, information asymmetries. I have to say, I really supported your efforts and think they're really incredible to go after the car companies who are spying on consumers and selling that data to their insurance companies for the express purpose of hiking their premiums. I think that is a really important effort to curtail surveillance pricing in the auto insurance sector, and what car companies are doing to spy on consumers is really problematic. But I do think dynamic pricing has a place in the market in certain settings.
But haven't car insurance companies been doing this for a while? I don't think that this is new. To my understanding, weren't they linking up with the operating system in your car, the computer system if you have a newer car? So they kind of already know what you're doing. I don't know, but it's kind of crazy to think about these things that companies are just actively doing everything possible to use our data against us so they can just profit more and charge us more. It really feels like this is happening. I hate to be like a Debbie Downer, but the cost of living and fees and taxes and subscriptions, I just feel like they've really gotten out of hand over the last 5 years. It's troubling because the whole landscape of our country has really changed, and not in a subtle way. And I think it does have a lot to do with just technology getting better and better, and the technology, I don't want to say overriding, but like the laws have not caught up with how fast technology is moving. And I think that we're seeing this across a lot of different sectors, not just, you know, retail and things like that. But I don't know what our government's going to do to try to fix this, but I don't think that they can necessarily keep up with it at this point. We've streamed a few different hearings about AI and about technology over the last couple of months, and you know, the experts flat out said that they can't keep up with all the new technology. So I don't know what the solution is, but I hope I don't know. I really don't know, because I don't necessarily think the government intervention is going to be helpful.
But it can also be exploited. I think we all just experienced that with the World Cup, where you know, FIFA used dynamic pricing for the first time ever, and the result was an auction for World Cup tickets, which priced out many of the most loyal and passionate fans and turned the sport into a luxury box for the wealthy.
Yeah. Now, to that end, taking concerns like that into account, you've recommended restricting data pooling and potentially even winding some previously completed transactions in which companies are pooling data sets. Is that right?
Yeah, but also I think the real question with dynamic pricing is, you know, what's the goal of the pricing strategy? Is the goal to maximize revenues, to sell scarce resources to the highest bidder? You know, dynamic pricing for resources that aren't scarce is really strange. Like, why are we using dynamic pricing for wheat thins? Target isn't running out of boxes of wheat thins when they're.
I mean, it could happen theoretically.
Sure, we've lived through these recent shortages, but typically what we're seeing with dynamic pricing in grocery stores and with the electronic shelf labels that the UFCW and Senator Hawley have talked about, you know, this is things like hiking up the price of ice cream on a hot day when they know customers need a cool treat.
What sorts of tools or data sets should antitrust enforcement personnel be looking for when flagging instances of these, when identifying surveillance pricing? How best do you differentiate the wheat from the chaff, the good from the bad?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are antitrust solutions at play here. There are data privacy solutions at play here. And frankly, I think there really is a need for new laws. This practice, as Mr. Heppner mentioned, is sort of in a legal gray area that's exploiting a lot of existing legal loopholes. And so while I'm interested in FTC enforcement, and I think state attorneys general have an opportunity to pursue surveillance pricing under things like existing UDAP laws, I do think a federal standard would be quite beneficial in protecting consumers here. And then, of course, you know, regulators should enforce that law.
One of the things that you've talked about is making sure that anytime somebody's using an AI purchasing agent, an agent powered by AI, authorized by the consumer to make a purchase on behalf of that consumer, that the AI agent must be required to act in the consumer's best interest. How would you define it and police that?
Yeah, I mean, this is an idea that I've started to write about, and actually Senator Warner has released a discussion draft of legislation, the AI Agent Act, to take this issue on. Look, my concern here is, you know, when someone operates as an agent in the traditional economy, the brick and mortar economy, if you will, they have to act in your best interest. Your realtor has to act in your best interest. Your book agent has to act in your best interest. We have chatbots in agentic AI operating as your agent, planning to go shopping for you, pick up airfares for you, or airline tickets for you, with no similar sort of
expectation of a fiduciary responsibility.
Exactly. You have to start to wonder, as agentic commerce really reshapes our economy, expected to be a $5 trillion book of business by 2030, what shopping is going to look like if chatbots are shopping in Google Gemini's behalf and in ChatGPT's behalf and not in your behalf. And so this is something that I've been doing a lot of thinking and writing about. I think a best interest standard is one interesting approach. I've supported Senator Warren's approach here, or Senator Warner's approach here, but also think there are a variety of other options worth considering.
Okay. So in other words, I'm out of time, but it sounds like part of what you're talking about is that consumer needs to know what's happening. And just because it's part of AI doesn't necessarily mean it's foolproof, doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't other influences at play, including acting on behalf of somebody who's a part owner of the agent or maybe given money to the agent in order to preference their product over somebody else's.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for having this hearing. And I think you can sense a bipartisan feeling of urgency around this topic, particularly among members of this subcommittee. In my view, we ought to be having this hearing with the full committee, and we ought to be working on legislation that incorporates some of the ideas that have been advanced here. Senator Hawley and I have a framework for legislation. We've also pursued individual pieces of legislation dealing with AI, and I agree with you that there may be a difference, Dr. Owens, between surveillance pricing and dynamic pricing, but for the consumer who sees prices rising, they don't care. Right now, we have an affordability crisis, and we ought to be doing something about the use of AI, regardless of what the retailer says the goal is, because it's a little bit like a spitball that's thrown. It doesn't really matter whether the spit got there purposefully or whether it just happened to pass by the lips of the pitcher. The effect is the same, and we outlaw the pitch in baseball because it is unfair to the batter, and the same principle applies here. We need a law. We need a federal law. We need federal standards. We need national safeguards. And to that end, I am deeply disappointed that the present chairman of the FTC has abandoned the work that began under the prior FTC chair. Lena Khan issued investigative demands for data from retailers on this practice, and at the end of her term, the commission published a preliminary report that found, quote, retailers frequently use people's personal information to set targeted, tailored prices for goods and services, from a person's location and demographics down to their mouse movements on a web page, and end quote. And actually, she raised the possibility that I think you raised, Dr. Owens, about a parent needing a thermometer. As a parent of 4, I know I've been out there searching frantically for certain things for our first of 4 children. I was less frantic on the 3rd and the 4th, but we know that it's not just the availability of the product that surveillance pricing looks at. It's also the need and capacity to pay of the consumer, and that's where some of the problem arises. So I'm very disappointed the FTC has abandoned that effort. On the other hand, states have begun to lead, in particular.
Okay, I gotta answer this from our chat. So I think his name is Doof Baboof. He asked why I think we should defund the FDA, and I promise, well, I'm gonna try not to go on a long rant, but my first comment to him was go to Senate.gov, or you can go back to some of my old live streams and watch the Senate hearing called Poison Pills. So there are many reasons why I think we need to defund the FDA, but ultimately, from the hearings that I've been watching and the research that I've done, it seems like the FDA does not work in the best interest of the American consumer. So I always thought that, and I think that they portray themselves, the FDA portrays themselves as a an advocate group that advocates for the American consumer and regulates things to help keep us safe, okay? But when we listen to these hearings and we dig a little deeper, we find out that actually the FDA gets a lot of their funding from big pharma. Like, for instance, we found out that when it has to do with the research studies, the government, or us, the taxpayers, we pay 30% of that, and then big pharma funds 70% of like the review process of these studies, okay? That is a big conflict of interest. So the companies that are trying to get you to approve their drugs are paying 70% of basically the salary, okay, the funding. So that's like a big conflict of interest for the American people. And I just feel like the FDA makes a lot of mistakes and, you know, approves these drugs, and people take them for months or even years and then get these terrible side effects. And then they're like, oops, I'm sorry, you know, the manufacturer said it was safe, said it was not addictive. Sorry, it like ruined your life or killed your loved ones. Oopsies. And there's no accountability for the FDA. The drug manufacturer, you know, if somebody's brave enough, they'll get sued. And, you know, usually nothing criminally happens to them. Maybe they have to pay a fine or whatever. But I don't understand why people don't point out, like, the FDA's role in that. Like, why is there no accountability on the government agency that was tasked to read through the research and protect us? And they approve stuff all the time that is not safe. Like Red 40, for example, the dye Red 40. It's been proven that it's cancer causing. It's really bad for your health. And we know this, and RFK brought that to their attention, and he was successful in getting red dye taken out of American foods. However, it doesn't have to be taken out right away. I think they have until like 2028 to get rid of Red 40. That seems kind of alarming for me because Red 40 is put in a lot of foods that we market to children. Okay, so our FDA is allowing poisons that cause cancer and other illnesses to be put in our food that we market to children, okay? That's what our FDA is doing. So I don't really think that that's in the best interest of consumers. And then I see the FDA like trying to go after like compounding pharmacies or like herbal supplement companies and, you know, try to say that they're making false claims or whatever. First of all, they don't even have oversight on those companies. They're not regulated by the FDA. But it seems like they try to go after and demonize companies that the friends of Big Pharma feel threatened by. So that's why I think that we need to defund the FDA. I don't think that taxpayer money should go to an organization that portrays itself as trying to help them and keep us safe when they're doing the opposite. And many other reasons, but again, I promised I wouldn't go on too long of a rant.
My state of Connecticut, along with the state of New York, has passed laws that regulate surveillance pricing. Some of these laws are stronger than others, with restrictions ranging from corporate transparency to complete bans. New York One Fair Price Act prohibits businesses from using algorithms to set prices in whole or in part based on personal data. Connecticut, commendably, also signed on to a bill that prevents retailers and third-party delivery services from engaging in personalized prices. These laws ought to be commended and elevated because states eventually, and I'm talking now as a state attorney general, will force the federal government to act. It's happened again and again, and I've seen it in action. Toys with small parts, warnings. Connecticut championed a law. It was upheld by the courts. And then the industry wanted a national standard so it wouldn't face a patchwork of different laws. But in the meantime, we need to build from the states a gold standard to stop these predatory practices. So let me ask all of you, but beginning with Dr. Owens, Ms. Karen, and Mr. Heppner, what has worked? What seems most promising at the state level? And should the FTC be acting more aggressively?
Yeah, so look, I've been really heartened by the kind of flourishing policy development in this area at the state level, but it has also really helped illuminate some of the challenges with doing this at the state level. Colorado moved a very strong bill through the legislature only to have it vetoed by Governor Polis. New York has passed what I view as the strongest piece of state legislation to ban surveillance pricing to date. We are still waiting on Governor Hochul to sign it. These delays and vetoes have resulted in really concerning industry efforts to water these proposals down until they are virtually meaningless. I'm happy to see states moving. Some of the state efforts are quite promising, but I do think a federal standard is the right approach here. And so I think this committee's hearing is just an amazing first step. And I hope, the first step of many to get this problem solved. This is a scourge for Americans. 75% of Americans want to see this put to bed.
Mr. Heppner, and then Ms. Karen.
Thank you for the question, Senator. I would agree that the Colorado legislation that passed earlier this year before being vetoed was probably the strongest bill. It starts with a very simple premise, which is that personal information should not be used to inform price. I think that gets the job done. Now, I think that there are limited exceptions to that we have known about for a long time, and the exceptions are not strange. They are not inventive, but they are exceptions for things that are not individually targeted prices, but things like student discounts and senior discounts, where sure, there may be some exchange of personal information to avail yourself of that discount if you fall into one of those groups. But these are not sweeping, generalized exceptions for personalized discounts, for instance, which to me is nothing different than a personalized price. If every discount is personalized, you are offering every member in the market a personalized price. Loyalty programs, another area where you can do a very simple exception that actually protects participants in those loyalty programs from having their information abused to make rewards points differently valued across consumers. Loyalty programs should not be, as one of my colleagues has called it, a Trojan horse for price discrimination, promising benefits only to hike prices after the fact. There's a report about McDonald's monopoly program, interestingly enough. It's almost too cute to be true, but that was used to actually charge certain consumers a higher price through their loyalty program. That is not what consumers expect. I think that there are various other things. I mean, retention discounts in a subscription context, which I think maybe ride a line that I find discomforting. In the Washington Post case, somebody seeking to cancel their Washington Post subscription was actually offered a retention discount that was 3 times higher than the price that they were paying. So you see vulnerability for discrimination and inaccuracies in that context as well. And it makes you kind of wonder, why isn't the price just the same for all subscribers anyway? But I think that if you start from that premise, you get far along the path. And yes, we would like to see the Federal Trade Commission reopen that study. And if they don't want to call it surveillance pricing because that is a loaded term, sure, call it individualized price discrimination. And we can make some progress there.
Ooh, they don't want to call it surveillance pricing, guys. Ooh, God forbid we say what we see. It's offensive. We got to change our wording to make them feel better about what they're actually doing. It's a joke. So my next mug, I think, is going to be defund the FTC. Because, again, watching these streams, I don't really understand at this point what the FTC does. I know what it says they're supposed to do, but again, it doesn't feel like they're doing that. It just feels like a lot of these government agencies that are supposed to protect our rights as consumers are really defending like big corporations. Yes, defund them and give the funds to us. Exactly. Or we need to pay less taxes, or utilize the taxes that we pay to give us things that we can actually see, things that are tangible. not some BS oversight and saying that you're going to protect us. And then, you know, we watch these hearings and we find out that, ooh, they're not really protecting us at all. But these corporations, ooh, they're really getting a nice big boost from our government, right? Maybe like universal health care. I'll be honest with you, Joe, I don't have a solution for health care. And the sad thing is, it doesn't seem like anybody else in our government has one either. And I've actually been in the insurance industry since 2015. And I have to tell you guys, again, I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer, but I don't expect the health insurance market to look very good in 2027. I think it's going to be a rough open enrollment for all of us. And I'm actually planning to do a couple streams with some partners to kind of educate the public just on health insurance and the private market and what actually is available, because this is something that comes up almost every night on my streams. People are very, I don't want to say, well, disgruntled, disgusted, upset about our current healthcare system. And what upsets me is that it doesn't seem like anybody has a solution in our government. It doesn't seem, maybe they're doing something behind the scenes, but they have not made it known that they have any help to improve our healthcare system. So I've just seen it get worse year after year. But let's continue with this. Great comments, you guys, though. There.
If the chairman will permit, Ms. Karen to answer.
Thank you.
John, oh my gosh. So John wrote, government jobs are all pensions and most states are drowning in pension debt. I can promise you, Mr. Dave, the lawyer, does not want me to get started on how I feel about government jobs and pensions. I'm not even gonna, Dave, I love you. I'm not going down that road tonight. But what you're saying, you're on to something. And most people, they don't know what you're talking about. If you want to elaborate, that's fine. But I'm not going to get into it, but you're right.
Thank you. I agree. The loyalty program discounts should be the same for everyone, and I think that's one area that the states that have been leaders on that issue could even, be improved upon. So I think that's one thing that we'd like to see tightened up in the state legislation going forward to make sure that those discounts are uniform, because personalized discounts are essentially surveillance pricing. And I just also would like to recognize New Jersey's law. It is specific to the grocery industry, so I know it doesn't cover a lot of these other industries that we've discussed today, but UFCW is really, really pleased with what they've done in New Jersey. Their law addresses both the surveillance pricing and the electronic shelf labels. It puts a 1-year moratorium on the shelf labels, requires a study, and it also requires the industry to provide information to the state on their pricing practices. Originally, it required that information to be publicly disclosed, but we're hoping that requiring them to turn that over to the Division of Consumer Affairs will help start collecting that data that we need to prove the case that this is happening and it's being used to rip off consumers.
I don't know whether anyone else has observations on the FTC question, whether the FTC, under its existing authority, can and should do more, but my opinion is yes, they should, they must, they can begin to advance this work to protect consumers. And this is nothing against capitalism. I'm a believer in capitalism. And corporations will use whatever is available, including personalized data, to increase their revenue and profits. That's their job, which is why we need those safeguards, because they will push the envelope, and we need to make sure that consumers are protected from surveillance pricing. Let's call it what it is. It's surveillance pricing, it's personalized pricing, it's individualized pricing that maximizes profits. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So I got to read this comic. Archaic Symbolism wrote, and he's talking about Blumenthal. No, because Blumenthal made a comment that, he's a capitalist. He believes in capitalism and, the FTC needs to regulate it, but capitalism is still good. And Archaic Symbolism wrote, no, he's not. I saw him at a live award show for communists and he was there. That's pretty funny.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. Thanks for your leadership on this. Dr. Zhang, if I could just come back to you and give you an opportunity to expand your views and maybe enlighten mine. I'm a lawyer, not an economist, so you have to walk me through it slowly. But just help me understand. In my state, we have very robust price gouging laws, and I know that because it used to be my job to enforce them. I was the chief prosecutor, the attorney general of the state of Missouri. And we quite robustly enforce those anti-price gouging laws. And a good example of this is that after a major storm or natural disaster, which we have on a fairly regular basis in my state law prohibits retailers from jacking up prices. Now, I have to tell you, this surveillance pricing sounds a lot to me like price gouging, where you've got information about a consumer who may be in a position of vulnerability. I mean, let's look again at the JetBlue poster and just think about this particular individual who was flying for a funeral, and JetBlue, using their information asymmetry, knows that, and so therefore turns the price up by $230 in a day. Why isn't that just price gouging? In other words, why isn't this surveillance pricing just personalized pricing? Call it what you like. Why isn't that just a more sophisticated form of price gouging where you're really exploiting people and their vulnerabilities?
Thank you, Senator. And if it is price gouging, you would think we already have laws to regulate them, right? So you don't really need a new law and to regulate that kind of a behavior. But of course, the price gouging law applies. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know. And they apply to emergency situation for the necessity goods. And even in those kind of situations, for instance, if you have a hurricane, all of a sudden they run out of the gasoline. And so in that particular case, of course, that if you're saying that we have to keep the gasoline price low, then of course people begin to hoard the gasoline, and then you're going to have an issue with the allocation of the existing stock for the fuel. Okay, and
but we do that.
Right. And so in that case, so what I'm saying is that...
But why wouldn't we, let's just pull that through. We do that because we think it's wrong. We make a moral judgment. We think it's wrong to exploit someone who's in a position of vulnerability. We think that when there is such an asymmetry in bargaining power, we say, wait a minute. We're not going to allow you to exploit this person. You could exploit them because their need is tremendous. This individual's need was tremendous. He was trying to get to a funeral, and the corporation knew that. Now, in other contexts, my point is, in an analogous context, we say, no, we're not going to let you do that. Why shouldn't we say that with regard to surveillance pricing? I'm trying to discover if there are any limits to your support for it. I mean, do you think that it would be fine to double or triple the price of an airline ticket for someone flying to a funeral? Do you have any issue with that?
I want to come back to the JetBlue case. I think that my mom actually recently passed away. So I think that if I face the situation like this, I would be really, really angry. There is absolutely no question, okay? Number two, that indeed that you see that if JetBlue is smart in using AI, and they would know this person has a funeral, there is really no good purpose for the company to try to make the customer angry here. Right? So this is too much.
Well, no, but wait a minute. But they absolutely have a purpose in trying to get this customer to pay. I mean, if he's really in duress, as he is, he needs to get to that funeral. They're just trying to maximize their profit. And he's willing to pay that fare. He may be angry about it, but he'll pay it by golly. The only reason it didn't work out for him is because it was all public.
Well, because they didn't get the good data. I think they got wrong data, and in this case, and probably made a mistake charging the person. That's why they basically went back and basically saying that if you do something else, we give you a lower price.
Well, no, I don't think so. I think they had great data. The problem is that he put this out there for all the world to see, and JetBlue exposed the fact that they've got all this information on it. My question is, don't you think we should put some limits on this? Isn't there some limit to the exploitation of a consumer's vulnerability, whether it's somebody who's trying to get to a funeral or a parent who has a sick child? I mean, don't you think that we should say at a certain point, listen, I mean, fair in the legal context, you referenced fair prices earlier. Fairness in the legal context means treating similar parties similarly. The equal justice under the law. It's that there's not a rule for me and a rule for Senator Blumenthal and a rule for Senator Lee. There is one rule that applies to all similarly situated parties. The problem with this surveillance pricing is that it seems to say, no, there's going to be a different rule for every single person. And the corporations have all the information. We have none of it. The asymmetry is astounding. They know everything there is to know I have basically no ability to set the price. They've got all of the information. Doesn't there seem to be something that is fundamentally wrong with that?
I would totally agree with you.
You know what the real problem is, though, guys? And I think he said it. It's not surveillance pricing. The real problem we have right now is surveillance. Why do we have all this surveillance? And I know we started becoming a surveillance state, a surveillance country right after 9/11. We were told it was for our safety, for our protection. We need all this surveillance to keep us safe. Flockham, Starlight says, yeah. But, ooh, I don't really think it's for our protection, guys. It doesn't feel like it's for our protection. There's like some pretty high statistics of children that go missing in this country, like in the hundreds of thousands. Why aren't we using our surveillance to find those kids? What are we using our surveillance for? In this hearing, we're learning that we're using surveillance to increase pricing when we go to the grocery store, to increase the price points when poor Mr. Smith's uncle dies and he has to get a plane ticket to go to the funeral. That's what they're using surveillance for? Give me a break. This is BS.
That there has to be a boundary. The boundary probably most likely is in the way you collect information, process information, and use the information, but not in a way that you would actually have a multiple price points for your product.
Okay, so I have to answer this. Well, why haven't you supported Trump being failed for his crimes? I don't know. Followed for his crimes? I don't know what word you're trying to say. Justice for all, same treatment for all, effing hypocrite. That's really interesting, and we talked about that a couple of nights ago. I just think it's really interesting that Trump was, charged and convicted with 34 felonies. And it's very unusual. You don't see that in that industry, that 34 felonies that he was convicted of, right? Okay, so he's a 34 felon, okay? So if you read his sentencing, okay, he has these 34 felonies, but it didn't prevent him for running for president, for becoming the president. He didn't serve any jail time. I don't think he paid any fines. So it actually makes our justice system look like a complete joke and completely look like it was politically motivated, that they brought him in, they gave him some BS charges, they convicted him of 34 felonies, so this is like, a buzzword among Dems. The left loves to throw that out. But there was no punishment for him. None whatsoever. So again, it just makes our justice system look like a joke. Yes, I am on a treadmill. And actually, guys, I've been in this judge's robe for an hour, so I am going to have to take it off. It's so hot, but keep watching the stream.
And if you do that, imagine that, I think at this point, somehow that our understanding is that anytime you use a personalized pricing, not only you're going to make a price variable across the customers, also that indeed the price always go high. I don't believe that's the case. And in fact, the fact that our prices are variable, they are already there already. And so you don't need the AI to do all that. And the firms do actually change the pricing in so many different ways. And but in terms of whether prices always go up, I think that probably is not the case. That certainly is not the case if the firm doing the right thing. And most importantly, I think recently I wrote an article criticizing what firms are doing. And they basically gave people the impression that any time you do personalized pricing, you always change the price and going up. Somehow make the price variable and also price it up.
Well, but isn't the goal of surveillance pricing always to maximize profit? I mean, and this gets back to, aren't the firms going to do that unless we, just like, I'll give you a different example also from the law, just like firms would absolutely run right over your property rights if we didn't have laws that define them. If we didn't have laws that say, no, actually, that belongs to you and I can't just take it from you. I might want it, but I can't just come over there and take it from you. I can't take that coat off your back unless I get your consent to it. Why? Because we have property laws that say, that's yours, and you can enforce it against me. In this case, the consumers have no protections. They've got no protections. The firm has all of the information. The corporation's got all of the power. I have no power to set the price. The only thing I can do is hope and beg that maybe at 2 a.m. in the morning when my child is running 102-degree fever and I desperately need Tylenol, that maybe if Walmart Plus is charging me $30 for it, gee, if I can drive to an open CVS, maybe I'll get lucky. I mean, I'm just at their mercy, right? That just seems fundamentally wrong to me. And I think it seems fundamentally wrong to most Americans, which is why we're here today. They think that, my gosh, I'm getting screwed in this. And they are getting screwed, right? I mean, they're getting screwed day in and day out. That's why we need to do something about this. Mr. Hebner, I want to ask you here, as my time runs out, but I'm the chairman, so I can just go on indefinitely. I'll come back to you, Senator Blumenthal. Yeah, we'll. You know what? For those of you who have been in hearings with Senator Blumenthal and me, the two of us together we can go on quite a long time, and I'm happy to do that today. Let me just ask you, and I'll turn it back over to Senator Blumenthal, about a JetBlue lawsuit. You know, there's this JetBlue incident. There's now a class of putative JetBlue customers who are suing the company. Are you following this? And what can you tell us about their claims and you know, why this is important, something we should be aware of?
Yeah, I think it's an important class action lawsuit against JetBlue that alleges a lot of what we've been talking about here today, that personal information, a wide breadth of personal information collected through JetBlue's website, collected through Google Pixel, was collected from would-be travelers, shared with third parties, and used to engage in discriminatory pricing like that is on this poster behind you. And they allege various violations of existing law. They allege that this actually is civil and criminal trespass against consumers. They allege that this is a violation of federal wire fraud statutes, criminal and civil. Now, some of that is based on the fact that the allegation is this was unauthorized. This was an unauthorized trespass, an unauthorized collection and disclosure and misuse of that information. And I think that calls into question, whether a consent-based solution is actually appropriate here. Because if that consent is buried in a privacy policy, those claims might not be viable. They also allege violations of general consumer protection law, state consumer protection law. And I think there's a strong argument there, but for the fact that federal law preempts a lot of the enforcement of consumer protection laws, and I'm interested to see how that argument plays out in this specific context, but in other contexts, false advertising laws at the state level, the Passenger Bill of Rights in New York, have been deemed unconstitutional or preempted by the regulation of rates, routes, and services by federal transportation law. So it's an interesting case, and I'm eager to see how it proceeds.
So I just want to read some of the comments. You guys are great tonight. So Sherry 47, Trump, all his cases were completely BS. I agree with you completely. The case he was convicted for is unconstitutional. SCOTUS will overturn it. I certainly hope so. And the conviction was an epic backfire for Democrats. It helped Trump win. Absolutely, I agree with this. Because anybody with half a brain that actually read the case and read the case law, didn't just call somebody a puppet for having an opinion that this is insane, and reading the judgment, if you actually read, and this is the thing, like most people, especially the left in here, they don't actually read the paperwork. They don't read the judgment. They don't read the cases. They just, parrot back this propaganda that they hear from the legacy media. But anyways, anybody with half a brain that actually read it understood that it was completely politically motivated. Trump did not do anything wrong at all. And I think a lot of us felt, okay, well, this person was the president of the United States of America. They're going after him. They're using the judicial system against him. They raided his home. They raided Mar-a-Lago. They went through Melania's freaking underwear drawer. If that's happening to Donald Trump, freaking American billionaire, American success story, the former president of the United States of America, that's happening to him, he can't be protected from that, then what's going to happen to any of us? If they can do that to Trump, then they certainly can do it to any of us. And if you don't think that and you're cheering on, that Trump was raided and Trump, was politically persecuted and you think that that's a good thing, you need your head examined. because the government can go after anybody they feel like going after. That's what all of these lawsuits and raids against Donald Trump proved to us. And that's why people voted for him, because we felt that if we have a chance whatsoever of being protected, he was the only chance that we were going to get. And let's be real too, guys, like, the Biden administration let in over 10 million illegal aliens. That is not good for anybody. We voted for Trump because we wanted that to stop. And he did stop it. We certainly do not have a large amount of people coming over the border. I don't know if we even have any coming over the border illegally at this point. My only criticism of Trump is that I wish that he was deporting more people at a faster rate like Obama did. You know I love to tell you guys this, but Obama deported so many illegals in his presidency that they nicknamed him Deporter-in-Chief. I love that. I love that. And I wish that Donald Trump, I wish he could compete with Obama, the Deporter-in-Chief, and that could be his new title. But he just needs to deport more illegals, in my opinion.
Is exactly the topic I wanted to explore, state consumer protection laws. Because you can't have the Federal Trade Commission on the one hand saying there's nothing to enforce here, and then have a judge say a state enforcement of consumer protection laws against surveillance pricing, personalized pricing, is somehow preempted. In fact, states have very broad authority under their state consumer protection laws. Every state has one, and they are extremely adaptable. I sued the tobacco companies under our state consumer protection laws. Everybody had a very convoluted theory of how we needed new laws to sue the tobacco companies when they lied to smokers about cancer and other diseases, about nicotine addiction. And I said, they're breaking our consumer protection laws. This is deceptive and misleading practices. And I think the same theory could be applied here. I wonder whether, and the reason I raise it is that it takes a long time around here to get a law passed. And there are a lot of reasons why laws don't get passed. There are more reasons not to pass a law than to get one done. And the elephant in the room today, the elephant in this room, is the one that Dr. Owens mentioned. The industries. The industries are tooth and nail against any of these restrictions. They will seek to water them down and obstruct them and stop them from passing, and it's much easier for them to do at the federal level than at the state level. And I've been in our state legislature, and I was also state attorney general for 20 years, and we used consumer protection laws to go after almost everything that harmed consumers. Because in order to get away with it, they have to be deceptive and misleading. So I would ask, maybe I should be in with you and ask others, can't we use existing law more expansively and aggressively to go after some of these practices?
Yes, Senator, in my opening testimony, I referenced that I think general consumer protection laws that prevent fraud, misleading prices, deception, can be brought to bear here. I have not seen a case that alleges that a price is inherently misleading because everybody in the marketplace is being charged a different price. But I think that there is an inherent deception. There is an overall net impression that type of price is misleading to a consumer. And so I would like to see the enforcement of consumer protection laws. Relative to the role of industry, I'm not sure that they are necessarily more influential at the federal level than at the state level. And what we've seen is the vulnerability of regulatory efforts to industry talking points that exploit the language of affordability to bake this technology into place. I think a really good example of this is in Maryland, where you saw a law passed to prevent surveillance pricing at grocery stores stores that was riddled with loopholes that are big enough to drive a truck through. And furthermore, that law it carved a hole in the century-old consumer protection law in that state that said that that law can no longer be enforced against the conduct that was regulated by this new law. And so I think the risk here is that when regulating this policy going forward, industry will see this as an opportunity to relitigate traditional notions of fairness and to create a new permissive regulatory structure to allow this technology to continue to do its work.
I see a few nodding heads, so if anyone has other comments, I'd welcome them on that question.
There's not a lot that I can add to that, especially with two former state attorneys general in the room. But I think some states are doing a good job in getting creative. Washington State has gone after stores recently for inflating their baseline prices to make the discounts look more attractive. So they've been able to catch them doing that. But it is really difficult. Without a paper trail, with everything electronic, there's a huge information asymmetry. It's very difficult to catch them, to prove how consumers were actually harmed. Regulators can only identify a very small fraction of what's actually happening, and that's why we think it's important to go after the technology itself that's facilitating the price gouging. And I also want to point out that in their marketing materials, a lot of the companies selling this technology, they market it as GDPR compliant, and so I think some of the data privacy protection that we have is actually thanks to the European Union and actually not US law that's currently protecting some of the even more egregious practices that the technology is capable of doing.
I think the other laws, and I'm repeating what's already been pointed out, I think the other set of laws that are potentially applicable here are
Hey, David, welcome back. So right now, I think you may have been in my stream the other night, but we are continuing this stream that's chaired by Josh Hawley from August 4th. And it's all about AI surveillance. And the main thing that we're talking about is how companies, credit card companies particularly, are using this AI surveillance tactic to get all of our data. Then they pass that information on to grocery stores. JetBlue has come up a couple times, and basically they use our information against us to hike up the pricing. And what Hawley has talked about a few times in this hearing is how they're really taking advantage of people in desperate situations. And he brought up somebody needing to buy a plane ticket to get to a funeral. And knowing this information, because they're using AI surveillance, they're hiking up the price, knowing that that person has to go to the funeral. And that is wrong. And that's what this hearing is about. But apparently there's some other stuff going on in the chat that has nothing to do with the hearing whatsoever. I'd like to bring the chat back to what we're talking about the hearing, because I'd love to interact with the chat more, but I don't want to touch this subject right now. I really don't. I don't have a lot of information on it, and it seems like people get really heated about it. I would rather talk about AI surveillance and how they're basically using our information against us to just bleed us dry.
Antitrust laws. In the real estate market, for example, some of the companies' use of AI to communicate with each other almost instantaneously to raise prices between companies has been met with legal challenges, and particularly in a market, come back to the airlines, where there's been a lot of consolidation. There are more opportunities for this kind of collusion. So again, I want to thank the chairman for having this hearing and all of you for your good work, and I'm sure we're going to be talking. Thank you.
There's just one more thing that I'd like to get on the record factually. Dr. Owens, if I could just ask you about it. I want to ask you about a patent, an actual patent that the Walmart Corporation has. This is a patent for a shopping cart, and I think we have a graphic to this effect. This is a patent for a shopping cart There it
Thank you,
is, that uses
PTSD.
sensors to track the speed of your cart, your heart rate, your body temperature, and then feeds it into a server for analysis. I emphasize this is not a joke. This is not, AI didn't invent this, sadly, but AI is going to use it. Walmart has this. Why would Walmart want something like this? And tell us how this feeds in to the kind of unbelievable information asymmetry that is driving this surveillance pricing.
Yeah, look, companies hem and haw and deny that they're using things like surveillance pricing in many settings. But I think if we look at what they do and say in other settings, the technologies they're building and bothering to patent, to get monopoly rights for, to monetize, if we look at what they tell their investors, if we look at the companies they're scooping up, they're buying up AI pricing tech companies who come to market offering new surveillance pricing technologies, it really paints a different picture of where this country is headed and where our economy is headed. And, Walmart is a treasure trove of patent data about personalized pricing, personalized promotions, surveillance pricing, and all sorts of additional privacy that the company, or private information that the company is collecting on consumers. I mean, this doodle is, pretty horrifying, but it's really just the first step, building out the ability to use, cameras and cooler screens to take a look at what you're doing, to use your grocery cart, to monitor your temperature. All that is feeding into consumer intelligence scores, agitation scores that better estimate how much they can convince you to fork over for every item in that shopping cart.
DoorDash has a patent application for technology to measure how agitated a consumer is, so they'll know how desperate they are to get the food, to get what's coming to them. Uber monitors your phone's battery life. And why? Because they say one of the strongest predictors of whether or not you're going to be sensitive to a price surge is how much battery you have left on your cell phone. When your cell phone battery gets low, think about this next time you order an Uber. When your cell phone battery gets low, people start saying, well, I need to go home. And so they think they can probably raise the fares. Now, the point is, I think what we've seen today, and what all of you, thank you for your testimonies, which you've helped us to get onto the record, is companies, the biggest companies all over this country are doing this. AI is helping them do it. And who loses? Time after time, it's the consumer. And particularly, it's working people in this country. Professor Zhang made the point, and I don't doubt this is true, that the rich may end up paying more in certain circumstances, and that's fine. But what I'm really concerned about is, time after time after time, it's working people who are going to be paying more, who are going to be forced to pay more, and frankly, the needy. Because the whole point here is to maximize the profit of these already wildly profitable corporations. Walmart, wildly profitable corporations who are trying to exploit every vulnerability. And the truth is, in America, everything costs too much already. It costs too much. Gas costs too much. Houses cost too much. Cars cost too much. Groceries cost too much. All of it costs too much. And now these corporations, who are the most profitable corporations in the history of the planet, are scheming with the biggest tech companies in the history of the world to figure out how to exploit you even further. And I would just submit that our capitalist system and our free market system, which I love and support, is based on a moral framework where we agree together, and we call those things rights, where we agree together that people have certain rights and we protect those rights. And we need to give consumers and working people and families in this country rights against this kind of surveillance and exploitation. If we don't do that, the basic foundations, the moral foundations of our economy and of our country will be devastatingly eroded. And you see it already, and this is why people don't trust anything. They don't trust any institution. They certainly don't trust any of these companies we've talked about today, nor should they, because they're being exploited constantly. And it is this body's job to do something about that. So we need to stand up and say, we're going to protect the American people. We're going to give them rights. We're going to preserve that basic moral foundation that makes our economy and our country more broadly work and that we agree on together. So it makes us Americans. It's done us pretty good for the last 250 years. I think maybe we ought to preserve it. I'm going to give you the final word, Senator.
I associate.
Oh my gosh, you guys, if you saw me spit out laughter, it was from Jeb's comment, and he was being sarcastic. If Democrats raise taxes, will that help? And I laughed so hard because literally that's always their solution for any of our many issues. It's evil. It's so evil for us to take the advice of the first ever trillionaire on this planet, Elon Musk. What does he know about running a business, making or preserving money? He knows nothing. He is evil. And how dare he look into our government and our budget and insinuate that we were wasting any money. We need to get more taxes from the hardworking American. That's the only way we're gonna save healthcare, guys. We need more taxes. We need to give the taxpayer money to subsidize the people that aren't making enough money or not even working at all, so that money can go right back into our friends at the big health insurance carriers, and then they'll donate to our campaigns. That is the solution of the Democrats. So that is why I literally spit out laughing at Jeb's comment, because that's always the solution that the left likes to give us. We just need to pay more taxes, right?
Myself with your remarks, Mr. Chairman, or in a different vernacular, amen. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you again to all of the witnesses. Before we close, I'd like to note the subcommittees received statements from the following interested parties: Professor Christian of the University of Michigan, Airlines for America, the National Retail Federation, the Center for Democracy and Technology, and the Walmart Corporation. Without objection, we'll put all of those into the record. This record for this hearing will remain open for 15 days until Wednesday, August 19th at 5 p.m. for the submission of statements and questions for the record. And with that, this hearing is adjourned.
So we still got a good crew in here. If you guys give me 2 minutes, I'm gonna put on another hearing. All right, we got some good ones. Give me 2 minutes. I'm gonna put on another.
The OAA and send it to President Trump's desk. Thrilled to see the old reauthorizing the OAA with the ranking member, Gillibrand. We've seen firsthand through multiple hearings the positive impacts legislative solutions can have on seniors and caregivers alike, giving dignity and strength to those living out their golden years. I'm especially proud to have led this effort in the Senate with the ranking member. I'd like to personally recognize and thank her for her hard work and partnership on this legislation. I now urge the House of Representatives to quickly pass the of Undersecretary for Industry and Security, performing the non- wanted to, they could restrict will now come to order. The ranking member and I were thrilled to see the Older Americans Reauthorization Act pass the Senate yesterday. This legislation is critical to protecting seniors' independence and reaffirms Congress' commitment to the older Americans who built and served this country. As chairman of this committee, I have been privileged to lead the charge in reauthorizing the OAA with the ranking member, Gillibrand. We've seen firsthand through multiple hearings the positive impacts legislative solutions can have on seniors and caregivers alike, giving dignity and strength to those living out their golden years. I'm especially proud to have led this effort in the Senate with the ranking member. I'd like to personally recognize and thank her for her hard work and partnership on this legislation. I now urge the House of Representatives to quickly pass the OAA and send it to President Trump's desk. I also want to thank my Senate Republican and Democrat colleagues for their support of our seniors through the OAA. Here's a question most people have never thought to ask.
Behind the scenes. But this hearing, hosted by our friend from Florida, Rick Scott, my other favorite topic, how, our FDA does a great job of allowing foreign entities to poison our medications. So, well, I think this is like the 5th hearing that I've streamed about this topic, in the last few months. But tech is fixing this for us right now. This should be interesting. Thank you guys for staying with me on a Friday night. So there's nothing more that I would like to do than get my steps in on this treadmill, chat with awesome people, and stream our lovely Congress and Senate. I hope everybody has some fun plans for the weekend. Gosh, we got a lot of chats in our chat about Israel
there's
right
not a federal
now.
agency.
We're gonna listen to the stream instead.
Thrilled to see the U.S. Senate Special Committee on Aging will now come to order. The ranking member and I were thrilled to see the Older Americans Reauthorization Act pass the Senate yesterday. This legislation is critical to protecting seniors' independence and reaffirms Congress' commitment to the older Americans who built and served this country. As chairman of this committee, I have been privileged to lead the charge in reauthorizing the OA with the ranking member, Gillibrand. We've seen firsthand through multiple hearings the positive impacts legislative solutions can have on seniors and caregivers alike, giving dignity and strength to those living out their golden years. I'm especially proud to have led this effort in the Senate with the ranking member. I'd like to personally recognize and thank her for her hard work and partnership on this legislation. I now urge the House of Representatives to quickly pass the OAA and send it to President Trump's desk. I also want to thank my Senate Republican and Democrat colleagues for their support of our seniors through the OAA. Here's a question most people have never thought to ask. Do you know who actually makes your medicine? Not what's on the bottle, but who owns the facility? Who controls the ingredients? Does a foreign government have any influence over the decision of what goes into them? Most Americans don't know, and in many cases, neither does the federal government. Seniors rely on prescription drugs more than any other age group. More than 88% of older Americans report being prescribed at least one medication in the past year. Nearly all of those prescriptions are filled with generic drugs, and a huge share of those generic drugs are manufactured in facilities overseas by companies with complex ownership structures like that the FDA, CFIUS, and other agencies can't fully trace. For most products, that's a trade question. For medicine, it's a matter of life and death. We've seen what happens when something goes wrong with a faulty supply chain. Unfortunately, people die. We've seen what happens when our supply chain gets constrained. Unfortunately, people die. I've said it before, there is no reason why we should be letting our adversary, Communist China, they've decided to be our adversary, control our medicine supply chain. If they wanted to, they could restrict exports tomorrow of the critical ingredients needed for life-saving medicines. The difference between a trade disruption and a public health emergency is how dependent we are on the country doing the restriction. Right now, we are very dependent. Today, we're going to examine a different but related problem. Not just what drugs are, where drugs are made, but who owns the companies making them. Foreign ownership and control can create leverage over our drug supply that is largely invisible to the federal government. So there's not a federal agency that's been designed to understand this. FDA doesn't have full visibility into it, and current disclosure rules don't require the transparency needed to even know where the risks are. And it goes even further than that. Most people think about foreign threats to our drug supply in terms of what's on the shelf. But there's another problem that almost nobody's talking about. When American patients participate in a clinical trial, American regulators authorize that trial. American patients take on the risk, but the data those trials produce, what works, what doesn't, what the next generation treatments should look like, can end up flowing directly to a foreign government that doesn't like us. Legally, with no federal agency able to stop it. That means Communist China doesn't have to steal our medical breakthroughs, we just hand it over to them. We have witnesses today who have worked on these problems from inside the government. They're going to help us put this on the record. Today I'm announcing the Pharmaceutical Investment Oversight and Accountability Act with Ranking Member Gillibrand and with Senator Warren. Legislation to require the FTC and CFIUS to report to Congress annually on foreign investment in pharmaceutical manufacturing and related technologies. Transparency is the first step, but it's just the first step. This hearing is going to help us identify what has to come after that. The American people, and especially seniors, deserve to know who actually controls the medicines keeping them alive. And I'd like to recognize Ranking Member Gillibrand.
So I do like Rick Scott, and my family has known him for years, and they really like him. I mean, you're going to take this the wrong way, and I guess I mean it as the wrong way as well. But I just think it's really interesting, especially after the recent Fauci hearing where Fauci pled the fifth 111 times. Rick Scott, you know, he worked in healthcare, and he pled the fifth quite a few times when he was on trial for like healthcare fraud or something like that. And I think it's so interesting that now he's a senator and he heads up the aging committee and often talks about these health-related issues and Medicare and Medicaid fraud and such. So I just think that that's interesting. You know, he's come a long way. I guess he is the expert in this field. But like I said, I like Rick Scott. I think he's doing a great job as a senator. I'm very happy with him in the great state of Florida. And I've really enjoyed his hearings on this topic. And, you know, he really inspired me to create my line of defund the FDA travel mugs. We have 2 different variations of the coffee mugs. And I actually did make a couple t-shirts. And I wear them around town, and people have been asking me to put them on the website. So that's coming too. We'll have some defund the FDA t-shirts. And like I said, Rick Scott is really the person that inspired me to want to defund the FDA. Because before I streamed the hearing titled Poison Pills, I had no idea that our FDA allows offshore manufacturers, primarily China and India, to manufacture our generic drugs, ship them onshore, and they don't require them to do any type of testing whatsoever. So once they get onto the shores, they just go to the pharmacies, they get dispensed, and we actually have no idea what's in them. None. We don't know if it has the actual active ingredient. We don't know what the inactive ingredients are. We have no idea. We just trust that these offshore facilities are following the protocols that we told them to follow. But we don't actually like do a great job of like visiting them and making sure that that's happening. They exposed in one of these hearings that, you know, often we give them a lot of notice before we go visit them, like sometimes like 12 weeks. So they have a checklist and they know all the stuff that they need to get in order before the FDA or any other American entity comes and visits their facility to make sure that they're following the rules. That's kind of weird, right? Because to my knowledge, the FDA, they like to just pop in on like compound pharmacies like all the time. Just like make sure that, you know, they're doing what they're supposed to do. And I don't think those guys get 12 weeks notice. Maybe a few days, I don't know. But I find it very interesting that there've also been tons of hearings, and we've heard it from Trump a lot too. China. China's trying to kill us. China's trying to poison us. I remember growing up as a kid, you know, hearing stories about China poisoning our dog food, poisoning our toothpaste. And, you know, I think we've talked about China interfering with our elections. So we're so concerned that China is out to get us. And even with AI and internet and technology, we're constantly hearing we got to beat China. We got to be ahead of China. We can't let them win. They're trying to hurt us. They're interfering with our elections. China is trying to kill us, according to our government. Yet our FDA just allows them to send medications to our country, and we don't have to test them. We don't know what we're giving grandma and gramps. Who knows? Maybe they'll be okay. Hopefully, you know, what's on the label is in the drug. Hopefully they're not putting like a deadly poison in that slowly kills our seniors or our kids, and you know, they slowly deteriorate after each pill. Hopefully that doesn't happen. I hope it doesn't happen. But we will never know because our FDA does not require them to get tested once they get on shore. So that, you guys, is what has inspired me to create these beautiful mugs. Link is on the stream if you'd like one for yourself. We got the 40-ounce travel mug. This is, you know, my favorite. I fill it up with my Chick-fil-A ice and my Olipop daily. Or if you're a coffee drinker like Dave, we got the red and black inside the regular coffee mugs. All right, let's continue.
Thank you, Chairman Scott, for today's hearing. Thank you to our witnesses. We appreciate your expertise and testimony. As the Aging Committee continues to examine a range of factors that put seniors' access to essential medicines at risk, we keep hearing the outsized influence of foreign actors on our drug supply chain. We know that America relies too heavily on China and India for the foundational components to manufacture generic drugs, the key starting materials, and the active pharmaceutical ingredients. And it's troubling how foreign actors continue to deepen their impact by expanding ownership, investment, and control of our supply chain. This poses a significant risk to the American public, especially because we currently do not and cannot see the full extent of our upstream dependency on foreign actors within the supply chain. This is in part because these countries try to disguise their involvement and influence in ways that our witnesses will discuss later in the hearing. But it also happens because we need stronger tools to understand, evaluate, and manage these modern supply chain risks. We must bolster federal oversight efforts and increase transparency on how foreign capital impacts American healthcare infrastructure. This will strengthen our health and national security without discouraging trusted investment. I'm proud to support the work Chairman Scott and Senator Warren do with their Pharmaceutical Investment Oversight and Accountability Act. But we also have to align policy goals and targeted investments to diminish foreign dominance in our drug supply chain and maintain our global leadership in biopharmaceutical innovation. This involves addressing market factors in the U.S. that have led to a race to the bottom for generic drugs. Congress must work with industry to make sure manufacturers and purchasers consider quality, not just cost, when they source key pharmaceutical ingredients and final dose medicines. Foreign countries like China have rapidly scaled up innovation for novel therapies through efforts like clinical trial reform, targeted government investment in drug development, and improved coordination between early research and commercial scale manufacturing. While we do not need to exactly replicate the steps that have taken, we must acknowledge that they are moving at a much faster pace than we are, increasing our dependence on their clinical trials and components for essential medicines. We can't let foreign actors, much less our adversaries, surpass us in innovation. It will only increase our reliance and deepen their control over crucial American health infrastructure and supply chains. I look forward to hearing from our expert witnesses today. I'm committed to working with my colleagues to improve our tools to understand, evaluate, and manage modern supply chain risks so we can strengthen our health and national security. Thank you.
Thank you, Ranking Member Gillibrand. Now I'd like to welcome our witnesses. They're here to help the committee understand where foreign ownership creates real risk in the drug supply chain and what the federal government can actually do about it. First, I'd like to recognize the Honorable Nasik Nik-Attar. How to do? Okay. In 2018, she was unanimously confirmed as the Department of Commerce Assistant Secretary for Industry and Analysis and performed the duties of Undersecretary for Industry and Security, performing the non-exclusive functions and duties while nominated. She was Commerce lead on CFIUS and oversaw the government's first whole-of-government supply chain assessment initiative. She now chairs the National Security Practice at Wiley-Rein. Thank you for being here. Please begin your testimony.
Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Gillibrand, and members of the committee, thank you for hosting this important hearing and leading important legislation to address critical issues. My name, again, is Nasik Nik-Attar. My testimony today is informed by my work in trade, national security, and supply chains over the course of 25 years as an economist, attorney, and policy expert. The threats posed by China's growth in biotech, fueled by IP theft and misappropriation, massive state subsidies, and a distorted economy that consistently underprices the rest of the world is well established, so I will not spend time of that. Yet these realities provide the context in which I will discuss our legal shortcomings and proposed solutions. In 2024 to 2025, China surpassed the United States in biotech innovation, deal value, and clinical output. Its innovations are outpacing ours. For every $100,000 in U.S. biotech R&D spending, America has 1 scientist, China has 3. China also dramatically outpaces us in STEM graduates by 2 times and 10 times more in engineers. Also, China's distorted economy intentionally keeps prices low and transfers wealth to the Chinese Communist Party, and the CCP uses its cash flow to underprice the rest of the world in biotech goods and services and subsidize their industries at a scale that dwarfs ours. These predatory economic practices are along with the well-established reality of pervasive IP theft, as well as clinical trials being conducted in China without any regard to the welfare of the population, is very alarming. To underscore, China is a foreign adversary under U.S. law because its aim is to harm our nation, our citizens, and our allies. So an adversary's ability to reach into and gain greater control of our pharmaceutical supply chain obviously poses a risk to America, our citizens, and to our allies. We need to look no further than what's happened in the semiconductor, batteries, auto, critical minerals, and robotics sectors as examples of what is yet to come. As to recommendations, first, most Chinese biotech investments in the U.S. seek to acquire American IP and sensitive personal data and disrupt domestic markets through market manipulation. To the extent CFIUS jurisdiction exists, many transactions are cleared today with mitigation measures. But almost always, violations of mitigation measures won't be detected by the U.S. government. This is a risk we cannot afford to take with a foreign adversary. Whenever investments by China come under CFIUS's existing legal jurisdiction for national security review, we need to institute a presumption of denial, meaning that the parties need to justify why the U.S. government needs to approve this transaction. I've never encountered, in my time in the government and private practice, any scenario where a Chinese investment in a U.S. biotech company did not pose a serious risk to being misused by the CCP to effectuate its MILSTIV fusion strategy to America's detriment. Second, CFIUS's jurisdiction doesn't cover most greenfield investments and joint ventures in the United States, which has obviously now become China's preferred way of investing. Legal jurisdiction needs to be extended by Congress through the passage of AFIRMA 2.0 and/or the president needs to institute an IEPA-based executive order to close the gap as it pertains to foreign adversaries. Time is running out and these gaps remain wide open today, enabling predatory FDI to occur largely undetected. Third, we need to impose broader export controls on emerging and foundational biotechnologies, biomaterials, and related data that are exported to China for pharmaceutical manufacturing and trials. Currently, all this flows virtually unrestricted to China, the CCP, and the People's Liberation Army. Broadening controls will permit biological materials and data to be treated in the CFIUS context as critical technologies, mandating CFIUS review. Without question, we can better control data through current export laws, and we should. Fourth, we need to address the fact that U.S. investments in Chinese biotech occur significantly through corporate licensing deals and venture capital. While BINSA, the Biotech Investment National Security Act of 2026, is an example of a positive step forward, it needs to be passed and the implementing regulations need to be broad enough to cover all forms of capital flow. Comprehensive bans are effective. Nuanced regulations enable widespread circumvention. Fifth, we need to import prohibitions on biotech materials produced in China. We have trade laws, forced labor prohibitions to do that to prevent the American population from being harmed. My final point is this. With respect to anybody claiming that these recommendations will increase U.S. prices, this is a red herring. China's growth in biotech is only a recent event. Prior to China's growth, the U.S. pharmaceutical industry faced economic pressures that stemmed from unrelated issues. If we have pricing issues at home, we need to address them at home. Relying on China does not solve our competitiveness problem. It only adds to it. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
So I gotta call out this comment think you're in the wrong stream. No, I don't even know how my moderators have left you in here for so long, but whatever. More comments, more money for the channel, so thank you. Thanks, Trump, admin, and Doge for destroying America and doing commie work for them. I just don't understand, I don't understand this point of view. I think what Doge did was very important, and I wish that Elon had stayed and continued, because they uncovered so much waste, abuse, and fraud, and that was just the tip of the iceberg. And in interviews, Elon had said, he was very nervous about releasing some of the information that he found. He was, scared for his life because of some of the things they uncovered when they looked into things. We've had an issue with our government agencies, like the FDA, way before Trump became president. Do you guys, what planet do you live on? There are so many instances where the FDA has approved a drug, and then, months or years later, we find out that that drug is either killing people, it's the best case scenario, or disfiguring them, ruining their lives. How do you guys think that the FDA is this great agency that protects you? I think that they do the opposite of that. And I know that this is a controversial point of view, but I look back at OxyContin and all that was happening with Purdue Pharmacy, or whatever it is, Purdue Pharma. And there've been a bunch of movies and TV series made about Purdue and OxyContin and what their reps were told to say. But let's just get down to the nitty gritty. So Purdue Pharma, the Sackler family, they created this time-released opioid, OxyContin, and basically made up research and were pushing it on doctors to prescribe to their patients for almost anything, a toothache, a migraine, and doctors were getting kickbacks or bonuses, all kinds of incentives to push this drug. And everybody wants to blame Purdue and the Sackler family, okay? And, they got in trouble legally, and nobody was ever arrested, though. They just had to pay fines. But in my opinion, they're not 100% liable for this. Why hasn't anybody gone after the FDA? The FDA approved this drug. What was the FDA doing? If they were actually looked into the research, they would find that there really wasn't a lot of research to support what Purdue said about OxyContin. And the opioid epidemic was a major thing in this country for years, okay? People turned into, I don't want to say zombies, but they turned into these demonic creatures and were busting into pharmacies to get their OxyContin fixed, okay? That is not normal. But this is a drug that the FDA approved and presented as something safe and non-addictive. And I also think it's, the doctors that prescribed it, there's some liability there as well. And that's one of my big issues with the FDA, because this isn't the first instance where they've approved something and then there's horrible side effects and there's no ramifications for them. They are literally the agency that is supposed to protect consumers. They sign off on drugs to say, yes, they're safe. It's FDA approved. You have that FDA, seal of approval. You're supposed to feel confident. Right now, the FDA is going after peptides, for example. And I hear people, that want to talk badly about peptides say, well, it's not FDA approved. So what? So what? What good is an FDA approval if they have a track record of approving stuff that harms the American public? that's just how I feel. I know that not everybody feels that way.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce Stephen Ezell. He's the Vice President for Global Innovative Policy at the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation, where he directs their Center for Life Sciences Innovation. He spent his career studying how ownership structures and innovation policies shape global competitiveness, including where foreign control creates hidden risk in strategic industries. Thanks for being here. Please begin your testimony.
Good afternoon, Senator Scott, Ranking Member Gillibrand, and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today, and I appreciate the special committee for examining the critical issue of foreign ownership, control, and influence, especially with regard to China in America's drug supply chain. The United States and China are locked in a fierce struggle for leadership in advanced technology industries, as China challenges America for global leadership across a range of sectors, from aerospace and automobiles to semiconductors and AI to biopharmaceuticals. China first identified biopharmaceuticals as a, quote, strategic and emerging industry in 2007. But since then, China's growth in the industry has been tremendous, as China's value added in this industry has grown from just $15 billion in 2002 to $190 billion by 2024. China seeks dominance across all phases of the biopharmaceutical supply and innovation chain, all the way from the manufacturing of key starting materials, KSMs, and active pharmaceutical ingredients, to generic and innovative drugs, in addition to the conduct of the clinical trials and the basic science behind them. We'll hear today about how China has come to dominate globally in KSMs and APIs, accounting for 94% of the KSMs for amoxicillin and 74% of heparin that America uses. But policymakers must understand that China's drug prowess isn't just APIs and generics. China now accounts for 31% of the new drug development pipeline globally. China has surpassed the US now in clinical trial starts for new oncology drugs, and overall their share of ongoing clinical trials for new drugs, the most innovative ones in the world, is now just 3% off the US share. China has deployed every possible policy lever conceivable to turbocharge its biopharmaceutical competitiveness. To be sure, some of these are legitimate, such as increasing R&D investment, educating scientists, or reforming clinical trial procedures. But a great many practices are unfair, such as rampant IP theft, non-market subsidies, and predatory pricing practices that enables Chinese producers to sell APIs for prices often 40 to 50% below global levels. And there's another unfair strategy: intentional Chinese obscuration about the true ownership nature of or CCP or PLA links of Chinese companies servicing the US pharmaceutical supply chain. Recent ITIF reports have documented such Chinese false flagging or brand obfuscation in sectors from aerospace to clean energy to biotechnology, as China directs its companies to downplay the company's home country identity when they operate in the United States. ITF's written testimony provided several case studies in the biotechnology industry, including Beijing Genomics Institute and WuXi AppTec. BGI, a leading provider of precision medicine services, which now operates the world's largest genomic sequencing capability, brands itself in America under the firm Complete Genomics, which it acquired in 2012. It brands itself as Complete to obscure the fact that it's owned by the BGI and directly linked to the CCP and PLA. The Chinese biotech WuXi Pharmatech acquired Minnesota-based biologics and medical device testing firm AppTec Laboratory Services in 2008, transforming the entity into WuXi AppTec. The company is now a world-leading contract research, development, and manufacturing organization. While the company has sought to disclaim its China ties, WuXi AppTec maintains an extensive network of relationships with the CCP, is involved directly in the Chinese military-civil fusion development strategy, and operates the PRC's state key laboratory of drug lead compound research. Its CCP party Vice Secretary Lin Wenbin has stated that, quote, party members are the technical backbone of WuXi AppTec. To deal with these obscuration practices, ITF recommends that Congress should expand the Corporate Transparency Act to require Chinese origin companies operating in high-tech sectors in America to report beneficial ownership and operational control, including minority stakes, joint ventures, offshore subsidies, and IP transfer rights. Companies that fail to provide full transparency should be barred from doing business in the United States. For entities owned or controlled by companies from designated countries of concern, the FTC should issue guidance on truth in branding practices, requiring companies to clearly disclose this foreign ownership or their foreign ownership in marketing, branding, and web communications. ITF's written testimony provides further policy recommendations for how America can enhance the security of our drug supply chain, from investing in novel biomanufacturing processes to friendshoring and strategic stockpiling. But we must recognize we're in a fierce struggle for biopharmaceutical leadership, and it's critical that Congress implement policies that effectively support the industry, but also ensure that Chinese predatory trade and economic practices don't harm American patients, workers, and companies. Thanks, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Now I'd like to introduce Edward Yu. He's the former FBI Supervisor Special Agent who spent over 20 years working on biosecurity and emerging technology threats at the FBI, the White House, and the Office of Director of National Intelligence. He represented the United States at the United Nations Biological Weapons Convention and has been featured on CBS's 60 Minutes for his work protecting U.S. biotechnology. He now runs EHY Consulting, LLC. Thanks for being here. Please begin your testimony.
Good afternoon, Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Gillibrand, and I want to thank the committee for this opportunity. I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I appreciate the title of today's hearing, looking at behind the label. I'm going to ask you to look beyond the label. And what I mean by that is an acknowledgement that biotechnology has become so advanced. In my 20 years in the FBI, now currently in my consultancy, you've heard disparate technologies being laid out. What I'm witnessing and what we should be acknowledging is that there's an absolute convergence of these technologies happening. And what this is translated into is that biotechnology is impacting multiple critical infrastructure sectors. It's not just health, it's also agriculture, manufacturing, renewable energy production. So it is strategic in its nature. And by the way, the fact of the matter is the Chinese government has acknowledged that. You're seeing that in a lot of their statewide policies, their 15th five-year plan. They're acting on it. And Mr. Chairman, you already mentioned about the CAR T-cell therapy issue and the fact that our own FDA has cleared multiple Chinese startups with CAR T-cell therapies. It is a breakthrough cancer treatment, and they are being brought over to the U.S. and being put into U.S. patients, and the resulting clinical trial data is then being sent back to China. What that means is that that data is then supercharging their AI to analyze it and come out with the iteration for the next round of therapeutics. But then what is even worse is that our companies, as it was mentioned, is licensing those products. So then our government is funding it through reimbursements, through Medicare. It is a double, triple whammy, and it's something that we need to be acknowledging. But with that in mind, it also means that data is absolutely the new oil, and we need to be looking at it that way. And the thing about this is that data doesn't spoil. And so that means it's going to be a continuing challenge. It also means that we challenge cybersecurity. It's not traditional cybersecurity. It impacts Medicare, Medicaid. It impacts health records, especially for our senior citizens who are dependent upon that. We have to acknowledge that that's what's happening in this space. And to broaden it even further, I also want to include agriculture, because the U.S. has historically been a powerhouse in agriculture. That has been the backbone of our economy. And the point is that now agriculture is not just a commodity for food. It is now being targeted as a possible solution for renewables, for biofuels, but also for pharmaceuticals. And so we are looking at the evolution of not just farm to fork, but farm to fiber, farm to fuel, and farm to pharmacy. And with that in mind, the Chinese have already declared that as a priority in their most recent plans. They just launched a 5-year smart farming plan to integrate AI, robotics, automation to supercharge their ability to expand their agricultural manufacturing capabilities, not just, again, for our traditional, but also for their future pharmaceutical capabilities as well. What is this all looking at for us? If you look at China's 15th five-year plan, their Healthy China 2030 strategy, but more importantly, their China Standards 2035 strategy. What that means is that they already know it's not just about the technology, it's not just about implementation, it's understanding how do they determine what the rules of the road is for the global markets. That they understand that if you are able to influence the standards, you will influence the markets. And therefore, we have to become subservient to that. So the issue here is that unless we understand what the implications are, my recommendations are, one, is understanding that it is absolutely strategic in nature that we are in the midst of this global biotech space race. Second is I recommend looking at the National Security Commission on Emerging Biotechnology that is supporting Congress, and so a lot of their legislative recommendations address everything I just mentioned. Third, we absolutely need to do a better job in assessing the risks associated with biotechnology and the bioeconomy, because historically, when the national security community, including the intelligence community, comes to the bodies like this, what are the predominantly characterized threats? It's pandemics or an engineered bioweapon. But we're talking about something more strategic now, and we cannot be isolated in our silos. We absolutely have to acknowledge the convergence. And as it stands right now, we are not established to understand holistically what these threats are. And I think the most important one is we just need to outcompete. You do not win a space race by playing defense all the time. It's more than just CFIUS and protections and export control. We outcompete, we out-innovate, and we are not established to do that right now. And finally, if we don't, what we're losing is not just market share, but we're losing on the promise of protecting our senior population, but also we're not fulfilling the promise of the generation that we leave the world a better place, and we put ourselves in a position to have our children to be able to succeed beyond us. And we're failing that right now. So with that, I thank you again for this opportunity, and I welcome your questions.
All right. Thank you.
All right, guys, I'm going to stop it for tonight. It's almost midnight here on the East Coast. But thank you guys so much for joining me tonight on this lovely Friday night. Great comments in the chat. And I'm going to continue this stream on Sunday night. I usually take Saturday off. But I hope everybody has a great weekend, and I will see you back here Sunday night.